Hello, and this video is going to be about getting you as a 40 plus runner either running for the very first time or starting running again because you've run in the past but maybe for a year or so you haven't run. And really and truthfully, if that's the case, you should kind of start from the beginning again anyway, because your body won't be used to running, So what are we going to get from this video? Well, I'm really going to give you tips that I think will keep you consistent and also more likely to avoid injury, which will mean that you won't be consistent. I think consistency is the key for new runners. I'm not going to go into a specific plan because there's plenty of plans that you can start for new runners. Couch to 5K, that isn't the challenge. The challenge is consistency and getting started and keeping going. So these tips are aimed in that area, and that's what we're going to cover today. So number one, what's your why? Because people talk a lot about motivation. Motivation will come and motivation will go. If the sun's out, you will feel more like running. What will stop your consistency more than anything else, though, is reliant on motivation. At first, when you first start running, it's not something that gives rewards straight away, unfortunately. Something I often say about running is, people say, "Oh, you've run a long time. You must love it." And I said, I do. 80% of my runs I don't want to go on while I'm thinking about going on them. Probably 80% of my runs while I'm running, I'm not always thinking, this is wonderful. What I love, and I know this sounds like a joke, I love stopping. And you might think, how many years you've been running like this, Lee? But over the years, the feeling of doing that is my reward. But you can't get that reward at the beginning, and particularly when you start, it's not going to be there for most anyway, or you'll get it from time to time and then other times it won't be there. And if you're relying on feeling it, do I feel like it today, you won't have the consistency. So it's a dirty word, but I would go for discipline over motivation. It's a much stronger thing. It's got bad connotations in this internet age where everything's meant to be great. Well, sometimes it won't. Now, obviously, I'm going to cover things in a minute to make sure that you're not overdoing it. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is small steps, consistent steps towards your goal are better than running 1 week, not running for 3 weeks, then running 1 week, then not running for 3 weeks. You're much better to actually have small, consistent steps. You're much better to say, I said to one friend of mine who was having trouble being consistent, put your running gear on and go out for 5 minutes, 5 times a week. And he goes, oh, what's the point in that? Oh. But I said, well, how often are you going out now? I said, if you go out 5 times in a week, give you 2 days off, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 minutes running in a week. At that time, he was doing none. So we tend to kind of set massive goals. And this is my second point. Start small. Accept and assess where you presently are. Now, this is not about beating yourself up. This is about being really accepting about where you presently are and what you can presently do. And it goes back to this kind of setting massive goals that at the time are motivational, but become unmotivating because they can seem so far away. Where if you're disciplining yourself and you're just saying, well, I'm going to do this small step every day and it's going to be doable. It's going to be like, instead of eating a whole elephant, I'm going to cut it up into small chunks and I'm going to do small parts of that. If you've never, ever run in your life, then you do not want to be setting yourself out for a 4-mile run. You'd be much better off doing walk run, which I've got a video on. where you may start out mainly walking with short bursts of running and keeping your running at a point where it's conversational. So the moment that your running stops being conversational, so if I was running with you, we'd be running and we'd be talking. The moment you got out of breath, I'd say, right, we're going to walk for another minute or two, or until we're walking and you've completely recovered your breath. Then we'll start running again. And there's two reasons for this. One, the joke is when people start running, they get an idea in their head. The problem is the memo hasn't reached the body yet. So they go off running and the body goes, oh my God, what's happening here? Are we being chased by a lion? So in a kind of way, it will support you the best it can. But if it's not been used to it, things start to break, aches and pains. Of course, that becomes demotivational. So the more you can avoid that, where you can have a little bit of discomfort maybe afterwards, you think, oh, a bit achy, but generally you feel good and you're pleased with yourself for doing it, that is going to give you the discipline to go out again more consistently. But really accept where you are. It's kind of almost like you were looking at someone else. You don't beat yourself up. It's just about, okay, this is where I am. Perhaps I need to lose a bit of weight. Okay, I don't want to be going out pounding the streets and injuring myself. Let's start running. Let's start in small steps and then give yourself a pat on the back for getting out there, rest up and go from there. Also, don't focus on miles. Focus on minutes. Focus on being out a certain amount of time. If you've never run before, like I say, just focus on getting out for 10, 15 minutes. If it's there and back, when you've done about 7 and a bit minutes, turn round, start coming back. Start out in small steps, whatever. I mean, if you're doing couch to 5K, they will tell you, and it will be more sort of like minutes based. And I would definitely focus on that over miles at that point. But it's really important to get those first two in place. Get a strong why you're doing that, why you're doing this running. Don't rely on external factors to drag you along. Find strong internal factors that will be there when things get more difficult, that make you think, yep, I'm going to do this. And then set goals and steps in small enough chunks that they can be like stepping stones, not great big leaps. That when you're starting something, at the time seems really motivational, but over time can become very discouraging. Remember also your hydration. I'm not going to go into that in a massive way here, but if you haven't done a lot of running, if the weather's fairly warm, or even if it's not, take some hydration with you. But depending on where you live, I live in the UK, it really comes down to how much you sweat. If you're not sure, take something with you just to top up and drink. Don't overdo it. Just drink to your thirst. And just to be aware, to know what running is. Now you might go, Lee, now you're really silly. No, most runners or people who've never run before don't really understand what running is. Running, in effect, is a sport where you're always on one foot. It doesn't mean you're actually hopping, but you're on one foot. So you've got to understand that it's about 2.5 times your weight that is impacted on your body, the downward force. If your body hasn't been used to that just one side, other side, one side, other side movement, that can be a big thing. So doing some form of strength training or being just aware of that it is this disproportionate way of movement where nearly all of us are going to have, we're not going to be equally divided. That's my point. We're going to have strengths on one side or the other. So, exercises where you get used to, I'm standing, oh, you won't be able to see on the video, standing on one foot, for example, moving on two other feet, depending on your ability, your mobility and your age, you may want to look into doing strength exercises. Yet again, the same as the running. Don't build something up so massive that you can't sit down on the toilet for 2 weeks, because everything aches. I've been there. But yet again, start building up that strength, because the running will build up your cardiovascular ability. But think of it like an engine. If you start to really build that engine in a car, but you put a great engine or a growing engine into a chassis that isn't up to it, then bits start to fall off the car, don't they? And bits might start to fall off you, so to speak. So start bringing in some strength training into your running. I'm a great fan of utilizing minimalist shoes, not for running, especially if you're a new runner. Don't do that. But for walking around, getting my feet used to moving more, that can be a great tip for new runners, but just walking. To finish the video, I haven't mentioned shoes. Just get something that you're comfortable in. You don't go mad. You don't have to watch 26 YouTube videos to find the greatest shoe for you. You're not going to be covering great distances. The degree of cushioning that you will need will probably be very down to your weight and your abilities. But at the end of the day, as long as those shoes are comfortable, for now, that will suffice. The main thing is to start building that body up to used to being able to run again. If you're restarting, or if you've never run, reintroducing your goal in your brain to your body, so the shock to your body isn't too much, and just keeping disciplined over just fleeting motivation, so that you have the most amount of consistency. The most amount of consistency will mean that you have a much higher degree of success. And when you get successful, guess what? You start to feel successful. Guess what? You start to do something more consistently, even more. And that's how you get yourself running when you're 40 plus. Hope you've enjoyed the video. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this, or if you've had success or even not success with your running in the past. Put them in the comments. I generally do respond to most comments. I think pretty much all of them if I see them. So I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.